we are going to start on page 37 of your pink workbook. So go there now, grab a pencil, and pause me if you need to, and come back when you're ready. We're going to start off on exercise 2, page 37, and we're going to be down here at number 2. Okay, and I'm basically going to be doing a lot of this right over here on my whiteboard. What I want you to do is go ahead and just write it in your book as I'm doing it so we can work together. So the first thing, let's go back to what fractions are, because that's what we're going to be learning the next couple of days is fractions. So here is my whole. I've got a big rectangle. Here's my whole. Now, I can divide this rectangle up into parts. Okay, that's basically what fractions are. So watch me as I divide him into equal parts, or pretty equal parts there, all right? I did my best, and let's count how many parts are in my rectangle. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5 equal parts in my rectangle. When you find out the number of parts all together, that is your denominator. Okay, so if we have our fraction over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts all together, I'm going to put that in my denominator, that number 5. Now, what happens if I shade that in? How many parts are shaded? Well, that's just one part. All right, and I know this is review for most of you, so we've done this before, but let's just go over it. So this is just one part out of 5 that is shaded. So 1/5 is shaded. Let's say we have this. Okay, so how many parts are shaded now? Now we have 1, 2, 3 parts that are shaded. Remember, the parts that are shaded in this case are going to go up on top in my numerator. Okay, so we have 3/5 of the rectangle is shaded. 1, 2, 3 out of 5 boxes in my rectangle are shaded. What if I were to ask you this? Which part of the rectangle is not shaded? Okay, so not shaded, once again I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for my denominator. My not shaded parts are 1, 2. They're not shaded. What happens if I were to take these parts, the shaded parts, and add them together with these parts here, the not shaded parts? So basically add these guys here. What happens? Well, what happens is that all together we have 5/5 of the rectangle accounted for. We have 3 shaded, 2 not shaded, 5 parts altogether are accounted for, and whenever you see a fraction with the same number in the numerator as well as the denominator, that just equals 1, okay? Because altogether, this rectangle is 1 rectangle. All right, so let's turn this rectangle into a number line. I've got to fix him up a bit because he got erased. Okay. This is essentially the same thing as this. Okay, I'm going to erase my shaded parts right now. But as you can see, here's my 0 over here on my number line. Here's my 1 on my number line. In between my 0 and 1, I have 5 equal parts. Let's count them just to make sure. So this, from this little tick mark to here, is 1 part. 2 parts, 3 parts, 4 parts, and 5 parts. So you have 5 parts all together. And if you remember from our first little problem up there, when the number of equal parts goes into your denominator. Okay? So there we go. Now that we've got this set up, let's go ahead and see what they're asking us on page 37, number 2. They basically have the same thing I have here, that little number line, divided into 5 equal parts, okay? Oh, and look, letter A, what does it say? It says the number line is divided into blank equal parts between 0 and 1. Let's count them again just to make sure. Here's 1 part. Here's 2 parts. Here's 3 parts, 4 parts, 5 parts. 5 equal parts. The 5 will go on my line in A. Okay. Now let's go to B. B says there are blank equal increments of 1/5 between 0 and 1. Okay. Let's figure out first what 1/5 is. Well, basically 1/5 is just the distance from here to here. It's just 1 of my equal parts. That would be 1/5. 2/5 would be 1/2 of my equal parts. Right now, we're just worried about 1/5. So how many 1/5 do I have on my number line? Okay, well, I bet you can figure that one out really easily, but let's go ahead and count just to make sure. So we've got, here's my first 1/5. All right, I'll just hold it up in my hand here. So here's my first one. Here's my second one. There's my second 1/5. My third 1/5. My fourth 1/5. And my fifth 1/5. Each of these spaces is 1/5, and I have 5 of them all together. So how many equal increments of 1/5 do I have between 0 and 1? Well, I have 5, because I have 5 equal parts, and each part is 1/5. So you can write 5 on that line. Let's move to C. C says 5/5 is the same as, we already talked about that up here. 5/5 is the same as 1. And look, this number line actually shows you that. You get to 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5. Once you reach your 5/5, you're at 1. Okay? If this was divided into 6 equal parts, you would hit the 1 when you got to 6/6. Okay? All right. Letter D. There are blank equal increments of 1/5 between 0 and 3/5. All right, let's look at that. We want to know how many increments of 1/5. Remember, increment is just one of our spaces, okay? So we want to know how many of these in between 0 and 3/5. This one right here. Well, let's just count. Let's just start with 0. So from 0 to 1/5 is 1. From 1/5 to 2/5 is another one. And then from 2/5 to 3/5 is another one. I have 3 equal increments of 1/5 between 0 and 1. Oh, and look at that. It corresponds right with my numerator. My numerator says 3. Okay? So go ahead and write that 3 in letter D, okay? And now we are on E. It says there are 2 equal increments, so 2 equal spaces between blank over 5 and 1. Okay. So 2 equal spaces between blank over 5, so between one of these guys, and 1. What is another name for 1? We said in our number line right here, it's 5/5. Okay? So we want to know which number we started at. Which number we started at, and that if we add 2 equal increments, we will get to 5/5. Okay, think about it. So here's 1 increment. There's my 5/5. Here's 1 increment, and here's 2 increments. So if we started at 3/5, there are 2 equal increments between 3/5 and 5/5. 3/5 plus 2/5, there's my increment, equals 5/5. Okay, so here's my 2 increments, starting at 3/5, ending up at 5/5, which is 1. All right. Let's move on to F. 5/5 is 1/5 and blank. All right. Let's think about this. Basically what they're doing is what I did up here. Except now, instead of using 3/5 as one of my fractions, they're using 1/5. Okay? So if we've already used up 1/5, how many more increments will get us to 5/5? So 5/5 equals my 1/5, which is right here, plus how many? Well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4/5 plus 1/5 equals 5/5 altogether. Okay? And if you look at this, this is how we add the fractions when the denominator is equal. When the denominator is equal, all you have to do is add the numerators together. So 1/5 plus 4/5, look, these are equal. Add the numerators, 4 plus 1 is 5. Oh, and remember what 5/5 is? It's 1. Fantastic job, guys. We'll be starting right now on page 38 in your pink workbook, all the way at the top at number 3. All right, so I have the same number line that they have in your book. I have it written over here on my whiteboard. Let's just look at it for a second. If you notice, here's just a regular number line on top. So we have 0, 1, 2, we could keep going, that's why the arrow is there. We could go to 3, 4, so on and so on. In between my whole numbers, my zeros, my ones, my twos, in between those numbers, we have little tick marks. And our space in between the 0 and 1 our space is divided into equal parts. Okay, and how many equal parts do we have in between 0 and 1? Well, let's count. We have 1 equal part, we have 2 equal parts, and then we have 3 equal parts right there. Because those are our equal parts, those go in our denominator. All right, so there we go, 1/3. They also did the same thing over here between 1 and 2, but the numbers on the bottom look a little bit different. So let's go ahead and look and see what they're talking about down there. So here's our 1/3, okay? Here's 2/3, there's 2 increments in between here and here, that's 2/3, okay? And here's our 3/3, 1, 2, 3 increments, we get to 3/3. Remember, 3/3 is the same as 1. Whenever you have the same numerator and denominator, that just equals 1. Keep going. What happens is if we add another increment to our 3/3? Well, it will be 4/3. Remember, 3/3 plus 1/3 is 4/3 because the denominators are the same. Let's just do that one really fast. 3/3 plus one more increment of 1/3 equals, since the denominators are the same, we can add these easily. The denominator stays the same in my answer. And then I add the numerator. 3 plus 1 is 4. Okay? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 increments. 4/3 increments. Okay? Now we're going to move on to the 5th increment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That fraction is 5/3. And now, once we move on to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, to the 6th increment, we get here at number 2, okay, on my number line. And with our fraction, it's 6/3. Let me show you a trick. When you get into upper math, this sign is not only a fraction sign, it's a division sign. Guys, what is 6 divided by 3? 6 divided by 3 is 2. So now that's one other thing that can show us that 2 is also equal to 6 divided by 3, or 6/3 in fraction form. Okay? Let's move on to our questions. The first question in number 3 says, the number line between 0 and 1, and also between 1 and 2, is divided into how many equal parts? All right, well, we just talked about that. How many equal parts are in between 0 and 1? 1, 2, 3. And how many in between 1 and 2? The same, because we have equal parts, so we have 1, 2, 3. So you're going to put 3 there on letter A. They don't want to know how many altogether. They said the number line there is the number line between 0 and 1, and also between 1 and 2, is divided into 3 equal parts. They didn't say anything about all together, okay? Let's look at B. There are blank thirds in 5/3. All right. Remember, our increment is 1/3. All right, so each of these spaces is considered 1/3. So, how many thirds are in 5/3? We already went over this a little bit too. So we have 1, we have 2, 3, 4, and 5, you guessed it. All right, there's my 5/3. How many increments are in 5/3? There are 5/3 and 5/3. So my answer to letter B is 5. Letter C. How many thirds are in 2? We've already talked about this a little bit too. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3. There's 1. 4, 5, 6. There's 2. 6/3 equals 2. So how many thirds are in 2? Well, we just counted 6. There are 6/3 in 2. All right. And let's move on to D. This one's a little bit tougher. So it says 4/3 is blank thirds less than 7/3. All right, I'm going to do it this way. So I've got 7/3, and then I have 4/3. How much less is this guy? guess what we could do? We actually could just subtract. But let's look at our number line first. So here's our 4/3. Ooh, 7/3. That means we're going to have to take this guy out just one more. 7/3. Okay. How many thirds less is this one than this one? Let's just count our increments. So we've got 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3, which will get us to 7/3. Okay? So we have 4/3 is 3/3 less than 7/3. That will be your answer, is 3. Let's look at this. We can subtract fractions with like denominators. That means the denominators are the same. We can subtract them just as easily as we can add them. So all we do is we look at the 3. Aha, they're both the same. That is going to be in my answer, in my denominator, number 3. Then I look at my numerator. 7 minus 4, 3. 7 minus 4 equals 3, so 7/3 minus 4/3 equals 3/3. And that is basically what we wrote for D. 4/3 is 3/3 less than 7/3. And remember, 3/3 is just 1. All right, 3/3 is just 1. So if we were to jump a whole 1 over here, we would reach right at 7/3. Right now, we are going to move on to page 39, and we're going to be doing 5A together right now. Okay, and all the way at the top it says, label the numbers marked with arrows on each number line. So here's our arrows. We have to label these fractions. Let's get started. Go ahead and follow along. Write these answers in your book. Okay, so the first thing we do, let's really look at our number line here. So, number line. Here's our whole numbers. We have 0. We have 1. If we kept going, we would have 2 and then 3 and then so on. In between 0 and 1, it is divided into lots of increments, into tiny parts. Let's count those increments first of all and find out how many parts we have in between each big number, each whole number. Okay, so here we go. Let me count them. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 equal parts all together in between 0 and 1. Is 10 going to be my numerator, which is on the top, or my denominator, which is on the bottom? If you said denominator, you are absolutely correct. It is going to be my denominator for all of my fractions. That is how many equal parts I have. Now notice I didn't count these because right now I am just worried about the equal parts in between the whole numbers, okay? Between 0 and 1, there are 10 equal ones, okay? And in between 1 and 2, there will also be 10 equal parts. Let's look at this next one here. Now if you start at 0 and you go to the first tick line, well, we've just passed up 1 increment, 1 equal part. We're on the first tick line. So my fraction will be 1/10, okay? So there's 1/10. So we've got the first one done. Not so bad. Let's just count, let's just keep counting to see what these other fractions would be, even though we're not going to write them down right now. So this is 1/10. This is my second tick mark, so it would be 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10. That's where our next arrow is. That's going to be 8/10. All right. Let's keep going. This would be 9/10. This right here is 10/10. Remember we said if we have a fraction, the same number in the numerator and the denominator, then that fraction is equal to 1. Sure enough, we're at 1. Let's keep going. Now for these problems, we're not going to start over. How many tenths are from 0 to this one right here? Well, we stopped at 8/10. Let's keep going. 9/10. 10/10. We actually stopped at 10/10, didn't we? Now, 11/10. This would be 12/10 and 13/10, and so on. But this one, with our arrow, is 11/10. First one's done. Let's look at letter B now. Here it is, up on my board. The first thing we're going to do is figure out our denominator, which is the bottom number. How do we do that? Well, figure out how many parts we have all together. Remember, in between 0 and 1 is where we're focused on dividing it up, or how many parts we have in between those two numbers. So let's count in between 0 and 1. Let's count our increments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. We have 7 increments. We have 7 equal parts in between 0 and 1. So my denominator for all of these fractions here will be 7. You can fill those in right now if you'd like. Okay? Now we're going to move on to our numerators. Let's go ahead and start with 0 and figure out each of our fractions. So if I were to land on the first tick mark, it would be 1, 1/7. 2, 2/7. 3/7, 4/7. 5/7. 6/7, and 7/7. And of course, we know that that equals 1. That's where we're at on the number line, number 1. This, if we kept going, is going to be 8/7. And then our next one is 9/7. There you go. Today for homework, your problems are very similar to all the ones that I've shown you in these videos today. So please take your time with them. You can go back to the video if you need a little review. And if you have any questions, you may email myself or Mrs. Workentine. Have a great day.